The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 1, Reading and Viewing. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to recognize sociocultural and political values, attitudes and beliefs such as attitudes towards gender, class, power relations, age, and environmental issues. Learners should be able to recognize the nature of bias, prejudice, and discrimination in texts. Hi there. Over the last couple of episodes, you've learned to recognize how people's values, attitudes, and beliefs can lead to prejudice and even discrimination. You've also learned how easy it is to label people and how this can lead to bias and prejudice. Today we're going to think about teachers and the role that they play in dealing with prejudice. Make sure you have a pen and paper ready so that you can complete the lesson's tasks. So, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to recognize how values, beliefs, and attitudes form prejudices, discuss how prejudice can lead to discrimination, find examples of bias and prejudice in text. To begin, think about how you would describe a teacher. Pause the lesson while you use your ideas to write a character profile for a stereotypical teacher. When you're finished, share your profile with others in your class. See if there are any similarities in the ways that you've described the teacher. In lesson 2 of this series, we met Sibongile, and we learned a little about the difficulties that she experienced when she was a pregnant teen. Let's recap on what Sibongile experienced as a pregnant teenager at school.
After I fell pregnant, I stayed in school, even though the teachers forced me to go out of school, but I didn't. I told them my rights, that I deserve to go to school because I didn't do this alone. And the father of my child, they didn't say anything to him, and just treated me differently, and it was fine with him. He didn't get any pressure from anyone except for me. When I was 6 months, the teachers started seeing me that I was pregnant, and they told me that you are pregnant and you have to go home now and stay at home until you deliver the baby. And I said, no, I can't do that. I want to continue with my studies. And they would go to other classes and talk about me to other kids and say there's a grade 11 kid who's pregnant and we don't accept that here at school due to I don't know what, but I used to hear that from other kids at school telling me what the teachers were saying. And they would call me sometimes and say to me, when are you going home? And I said, I'm not prepared to go home now or anytime soon, except for when I'm close to the delivery. And they said, you have to go home. And I said, no, I can't. And that created the tension between me and the teachers.
What do you think of Sibongile's teachers now? Have you had experiences with a teacher where you felt you were discriminated against? Read through your character profile. Is there anything you would like to change in your character profile of a teacher? Today we're going to meet 2 teachers who may challenge some of our understandings of teachers. Both of these teachers have very clear ideas of how to work with stereotypes. Let's start by meeting Hazel.
So they tend to stereotype themselves, and then from there, I suppose, we also generalize in a way and say, you lot of the stoners. Because again, I feel that if we deal with it head on and pretend that the issue is not there, then for them it's a lot easier. And I find that then they're more approachable. They'll come to you and say to you, ma'am, this is my problem or my situation, because they do feel that they can identify with you. But it's more, again, as I said, in a poking fun way. Are you not with us because where were you at break and what were you smoking? Those kind of issues. And then the whole class will laugh about it and then we'll get on with the lesson. Generally, I find that, once again, it's humanizing it and making them aware of the fact that we aren't blind to what's going on. We know what's out there. We know what's happening. Reaction to people discriminating against each other would normally then, that would take on the form of the lesson. And again, it would be about discussion. And again, we're not here to preach to you, we're here to advise to you. I think sometimes adults can make that situation worse in terms of they feel that we're preaching to them. A lot of them feel that we're old stock and that we haven't actually been there and done that before. And they don't see it that we have. I think in terms of being approachable, I think it's probably different for each teacher. I think with me, I'm the drama teacher, so I'm a little bit more eccentric, I'm a little bit more open-minded than, say, for example, one of our teachers who might be in their late 50s. And I think probably in my body language and the way I approach certain topics would make them find me a little bit more approachable. Advice or communication skills for other teachers or parents out there is to be open-minded, not to be judgmental. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you and to guide you along the way. And, sometimes my advice might not be the right advice that suits you, but again, you don't always have to take advice that is given to you. If I am approached, it's very much on a confidentiality basis. It's not discussed with anybody else, because that is your right as a child, is to be able to find someone that you can trust and that you can talk to. No one really wants to believe that their child is actually the one that's doing wrong, or their little darling or angel can't possibly be drinking after school, they can't possibly be smoking dope, not my little angel.
So now, let's meet Roy.
Discrimination, I think, is a human problem. I think we've seen it, whether we talk Nazi Germany, the caste system in India, the apartheid system in South Africa. We have seen discrimination is a human condition. What I do find with our children is, and I think this is pretty universal, is that children are a lot less discriminatory than adults, until the moment comes where they're in trouble. Once they're in trouble, then they will turn and pick on some discriminatory fact to try and offload that trouble. There's the old English saying, birds of a feather flock together. You will find certain ones gathering together, others that are not part of that crowd. It's very much the in and out crowd situation that exists. I don't think you will ever get rid of that. Generally, when stress or problems break out, that's where you see discrimination coming in. It's not because they actually discriminate, but because they use discrimination. However, and I think children are like that generally, they will use any method to get out of trouble themselves. And so they use the fact of difference in one way or another. One thing we will not tolerate in any way is discrimination. The staff are actually pretty hectic about the whole concept of prejudice. And so I've seen children who I came across 3-4 years ago who had no hassles with, for instance, violent racial discriminatory remarks or violent homophobia or something like that, who today have a totally different point of view. And I can only quote really from Bessie Head's Maru, which is one of the matric set works, which deals totally with prejudice, where she says, the children are not born with prejudice. They learn it from their parents. And if their parents are not going to teach them any better, we as teachers have to take that responsibility.
As you can see, there's a lot more to being a teacher than meets the eye. Reread your character profile and review what you've written in light of what you've just heard. Are there any changes you'd like to make? How have your understandings of teachers changed? Discuss this with a partner. Have you ever encountered values, attitudes, and beliefs towards homosexuality? What kinds of attitudes have you encountered? Do you think that people in South Africa are prejudiced towards homosexuals? Is there discrimination on the basis of sexual preference in South Africa? Read the sentence taken from a letter to the press, and then with a partner, try to work out how the writer feels about homosexuality. What is his attitude? Does he hold any prejudices? And if so, what are they and how can you tell? We don't go to that gym anymore. The guys all mince around watching the muscle talent, obviously hoping they'll get some after gym action. And the women are all too butch for words. There is not a straight one in the bunch. Did you pick up on the writer's attitudes towards homosexual people? Firstly, he uses the word mince to describe the way the guys in the gym walk around. This word has negative connotations. It suggests that they take little steps and walk in a feminine way. Perhaps they swing their hips from side to side, a bit like a woman would. The writer also suggests that the guys in the gym are only there because they're only watching other guys and are hoping that they will be able to get together with them after gym. The writer believes, therefore, that all gay men are only interested in one thing: sex. He also states that all lesbian women are butch. This word also has negative connotations because it suggests that all lesbians are manlike and only worried in building up their muscles. The writer no longer goes to that gym because he obviously does not like homosexuals and he's prejudiced towards them. But his beliefs about homosexuals are actually assumptions. All lesbian women are not butch and all gay men are not only interested in sex. These beliefs have led him to being prejudiced, even though they are not the truth. The letters page in the newspaper is a good place to find out how people feel about different things. Here's today's task. Your task is to read the following letter and then identify the following questions. Why has the writer written the letter? What attitudes does the writer hold? Is the writer prejudiced in any way? How could this prejudice lead to discrimination? Here is the letter. Weighty individual uses more than his fair share of seating. Recently on a trip to the States, I was lucky enough to be seated next to an American gentleman. Now I say lucky because our chance meeting has led to my immediate loss of at least 5 kilograms and 1 dress size. Americans obviously need to have warning labels written on the sides of their immensely tasteless white no-fiber bread, their over-processed cheese, and their takeout bags. The warning should be absolutely clear. The warning should be all in caps and written in bright red. The warning should in no uncertain terms tell them, this product makes you fat. As Americans obviously cannot read the labels on the products, I spent an immensely uncomfortable flight. I was forced to share my seat as he flowed over his chair and into mine. Surely if you're that large, you should be paying for an extra seat. Have you ever considered that your teachers may themselves have been victims of prejudice or discrimination? While you watch this next clip, consider how hurtful prejudice and discrimination can be.
Once you let people know you're a victim, then you become an easy target, and then they know these are the buttons that we can push to make this person snap. And I think that sometimes we have to put on that tough exterior. And yeah, I've always had a bit of a weight issue, and it has been an issue for other people. I don't know why people find that it's fun to, I don't know, people feel it's their right if you're overweight for them to tell you, oh, you can't be eating that, or you're fat. I think that fat people are fully aware of the fact that they're fat, and I don't think, but it happens. People feel it's their right for them to tell you. And, you know, you shouldn't be at a restaurant eating, and you shouldn't be having takeaways, you should be having a salad, because that would be far more beneficial for you. So, yeah, I have been discriminated against in terms of that. You know, it's easy to say sticks and stones will break my bones. But I think underneath it all, it does still get to one, especially when people feel they have the right to tell you that you have an issue or you have a problem in terms of that. But I've grown used to it, and I know how to deal with it now, and it's not necessarily getting the fat jokes out first. It's also just saying to people that, you know, beauty fades, but stupidity's forever. That's kind of my motto.
Well, guys, we've come to the end of our series, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I will leave you with a closing thought from Hazel. Bye.
I think as kids and teenagers, we're not always aware of the fact that not only are we a victim, but we also then discriminate against other people, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously we generally do. We label people, we put them into groups, we click them, we categorize them, and we often feel, well, I've been hurt, so I need to give it back. And generally that's not the way to go about it. Sometimes to ignore the situation also doesn't help, but I think you need to be strong and trust in your own self, your own values, your own morals, and try to, obviously it's hard for you to not take things personally if you are discriminated against, but to realize that on both sides that you are also giving out, not necessarily understanding that you are giving out by labeling people and by putting them into groups. and rather just try and take a step back and have a look at yourself and think about if someone has been discriminated or prejudiced against you, how that makes you feel before you immediately pass that back. And just stop to think, oh, hang on, I really felt shitty about that. It didn't work for me. I was really hurt. And how that person, you know, you don't necessarily know where they're coming from or what their background is like. But if you think your life is bad, there are 100 times people out there whose situation is far worse. And you could actually push that person over the edge. You know, teenage suicide is on the increase all the time. And a lot of that comes from discrimination and prejudice because they can't actually cope with what's being said because they take it to heart. And I think one should just think about that before one inflicts one's harsh words on somebody else.